Hi, everybody. Welcome back to the Intercooler podcast with Dan Prosser and Andrew Frankel. This is episode 237. And we're talking about the death of the hypercar.
Question mark.
We're not declaring it dead. We're sort of wondering what's next, right?
Yeah.
And this is off the back of the launch of the W1, the McLaren, and the Ferrari F80, two new hypercars.
Yes.
But listen, before we get started, I just need to remind everybody that as a podcast listener or a podcast viewer, we're offering you a 15% discount on the cost of subscribing to the Intercooler. If you go to the subscribe page, at checkout, use the coupon code POD15 and you'll get a 15% discount. Now, it's the best way to support the show. We really do appreciate it. Lots of you have used this code already, but we want more of you to do so. And of course, you're not just supporting the show, you're getting full and unlimited access to our online car magazine, which is ad-free, it's multi-award winning, and it's got the best team of automotive writers working anywhere in the world today. You can't say fairer than that, can you?
No, you can't. And we know that if you do subscribe, the overwhelming likelihood is that you'll stay subscribed. So this isn't us just, clearly it helps us and we really, really appreciate it. And an enormous number of people who listen to this podcast, but we are aware that we're getting new listeners all the time, have gone on subscribed. We're very grateful. But actually, we genuinely think the Intercooler website and app is a great thing. If you love just great automotive writing, not just from journalists, but from designers and from engineers and from drivers, doing stuff which you just don't find anywhere else. That's what people say to us all the time, is you can't find content like that anywhere else. Go and check it out. Use the discount code, have a look, see what you think, and we'll be grateful, and hopefully you'll be entertained massively at the same time.
Yeah, so it's POD15 at checkout. That's the coupon code POD15 for a 15% discount. Just head to the-intercooler.com. Okay, let's talk hypercars.
Yeah.
So I find it bizarre that these hypercars tend to come in batches. Last time it was 3.
Yep.
This time it's 2.
Yeah.
It is strange. It's almost as though they're in cahoots,
but they're not.
Drum up the interest or something.
Yeah, they seem to. Particularly the group, the trio you're referring to, which became known forever after as the Holy Trinity. The Porsche 918 Spider, the McLaren P1, and the Ferrari.
Yes.
They all just turned up at almost the same time. It was absolutely. And what was even more bizarre about them was they all had the same approach. They were all the first hybrid hypercars. And yeah, you're right. We've got a new McLaren, we've got a new Ferrari, but we mustn't forget all the others that have come in between. There have been. I did a list. If you go onto the Intercooler website and read my story called "The Death of the Hypercar?" I've listed all the 1,000 horsepower hypercars that I can think of that have been launched in the last however many years. Not many. There are a few.
Yeah. So Andrew has written a piece.
Yeah.
On this topic, and it's had an amazing reception.
It's amazing.
One of the great things about TI, and this isn't another plug, I promise, but it's the comments, the feedback, the contributions that our readers make all the time.
Do you know, I often spend probably more time, certainly have as much fun replying to comments and reading comments and just chatting effectively to the people who subscribe to what we do as I do, writing the story which, sparks all those comments. And it is such an involved and engaged and enthusiastic and above all intelligent audience. We just don't get the mudslingers, do we?
No, we don't.
And it's great. It's really, it's a great, I think, I've always thought community is a slightly sort of silly word, but it is. It's what it feels like. But anyway.
So it's had 50 or so really intelligent, thoughtful comments.
Long.
So this is a topic that resonates with people.
Yeah.
And I thought we should turn that excellent article into a podcast episode because there's so much to discuss. But one of the the sort of common threads running through all those comments, running through your article, is that with the arrival of, and they'll have a name at some point, won't they? The duo that's just turned up, the McLaren and the Ferrari. They haven't caused the
Shall we try and think of a name right here?
No. Well, you can try if you like.
The deadly duo. The devilish duo.
Let's not do that, please.
Les enfants terribles. No, okay. Keep going. The terrible twins.
No, something like that.
Yeah, something like that.
But they...
You can see why I write for a living rather than talk, can't you?
I don't think there's the same buzz and excitement around these two as there was for the Holy Trinity.
That's why I wrote the story
11, 12 years ago.
Actually, it was, again, and I do mean this, it was thanks to the TI community that I wrote that story, because, we did the story when the W1 was unveiled, and then we did another story when the F80 was unveiled. And just reading through the comments, for both cars, they were overwhelmingly negative. And I don't think that's because people in particular have got a downer on McLaren or on Ferrari or any of their more routine products. I think people just think that these cars in their current form have gone far enough. And the contrast, and the real reason I wrote the story, was I was around, as were you, when the P1 and the 918 and the LaFerrari were launched. And the vibe could not have been more different. Those were cars. We all just, I was there at all the shows, and the buzz and the excitement. And, can you remember when, and I wrote about this in the story briefly, when Chris Harris was the first person to get all three on track together? He went down and he hired Portimao for a couple of days and managed to persuade all three manufacturers to turn up with cars. And just what an incredible reception that video got, how jealous we all were. And, that moment when, you kind of knew that you were going to go and drive one and, getting really revved up about it because this felt like something different. You knew this was going to be an occasion you'd remember for the rest of your career. And it was all just, wow, exciting. And it had been that way, I came into this business just after the launch of the F40. So I didn't drive that, but I was certainly all around for the early 90s stuff, for the, for the Bugattis and the McLaren and the Jaguar XT220 and that sort of thing. And they all had the same sort of thing going for them. They were all so exciting because they broke new ground. And, this was just fresh and different and interesting. And I'm just not getting that anymore.
No. That excitement isn't there because they don't appear to break that new ground that you mentioned.
But it is that. But also, I think it's something else, and something else which is perhaps more profound, which is, I think, increasingly, people are asking the question, is this ground even worth breaking? Because 40 years ago, when Ferrari introduced its new GTO, what became known as the 288 GTO, that 400 horsepower. So we're talking about cars, so it had 1/3 of the power of the McLaren W1. A third.
Yeah.
And at the time, well, I wasn't a journalist then. I was a teenager or something. But we were all just still going, oh my goodness. And because the ground then was worth breaking, because the performance that they provided, the marginal gain was usable, and you could, if you were lucky enough to drive these things, to experience these things, it was enjoyable. There's nothing enjoyable about going from 0 to 60 in 2 seconds. There's nothing enjoyable about it at all. I defy anyone to say, look me in the eye and say, yeah, I really enjoy doing that. It makes you feel sick.
It's also a totally automated process, more or less.
Yeah.
You're just lifting off a brake pedal. There's, like in a McLaren
Exactly.
F1, you set that 0 to 60 time.
Yeah.
That takes skill, judgment. You have to finesse it. I'm sure you have to get the shifts right. That's exciting.
Between you and me, an awful lot of goes as well.
Oh, really?
Oh, well, yeah. Yeah, because, because you have to short shift out of first. And you're on part throttle in first, and you're still short shifting into second. You wouldn't believe how little grip was available on tyres back then. And then you're on part throttle through most of the way through second, and then right at the top of second you can. So you don't know any of this when you do it for the first time. So it's trial and error, and you have to work it out, and then you get it done. But you
are driving.
Are you? Yeah, absolutely. And the car may not be travelling in an entirely straight line while you're doing it because it's probably squirming around a bit, so you're trying to control. And it's an electrifying experience. It's not. Whereas do it today, it's almost like being at the cinema, isn't it? And just watching Star Wars. The scenery is just suddenly rushing towards you.
Yeah. Takes no skill.
So that is the question. Is well, there are two questions. Is do these cars break new ground, and if they are, which increasingly they're not, is that ground even worth breaking? Because have we got to a point where it's just too much? We're talking about gains in performance which simply cannot be used. And I think that there is a credibility issue around these cars now among people who, like our audience, are real, what I would call proper traditional enthusiasts. People who love cars, not because of what they think their cars say about them, but they just love the sensations of driving, of being involved and of using all the performance that a car has to offer. And, even with quite, comparatively compared to hypercars, medium high performance cars, we're getting increasingly into a level where performance is becoming more and more difficult to use.
That's true. And in the case of the W1 and the F80, there does seem to be a little bit of a sense of being underwhelmed out there, because the technology is very much evolutionary, isn't it?
Yeah, completely.
They're plug-in hybrids. Yeah. They, in the case of the McLaren, it's still got some electric-only range. Has it? Yeah, I think it has. Oh, I can't remember.
No, I don't
but that's not
does.
important.
I don't think it does.
But it's still a twin-turbo V8 with a hybrid system.
Yeah.
It's still got that active aero.
Mm-hmm.
So where has the progress come over and above the mighty P1?
Well, I think if you were to ask McLaren that question, they would say that, they have, from its engine alone, which is similar size to 4-litre rather than 3.8, but it's their engine alone, more power than they got from the entire engine hybrid combined of the P1. They would tell you that it's lighter. They would tell you that it's more compact. They would tell you that it's not just the powertrain, that the advances in suspension and in aero and in active aero. I mean, the thing has, I think, didn't the P1 have like 600 kilos of downforce when it was in absolute maximum flat on the deck track mode? Well, this one now has 1,000. You always have to be careful with downforce figures because it's so easy to create a misleading impression, because downforce on its own is a meaningless figure, because what matters is the speed at which that downforce is being developed. So we can't read too much into that. It's also, front to rear balance and how much is developed on the front of the car, how much on the back of the car. So, downforce is an entire grey area. Maybe we'll sort of go into more detail at another time. So the word you used, evolutionary. I mean, McLaren will say, if you say to McLaren, why did you wait, whatever it is, 12, 13 years since before you did another one of these cars? And of course, they've done the Elva, they've done the Senna, and they've done the Speedtail. But this is very much the replacement.
This is a one.
This is a one, exactly. And philosophically, it occupies exactly the same ground as the previous car, in that its aim is not to be the fastest car around the track like the Senna was, and it's not to be this incredible long-distance, ultra-high-speed thing like the Speedtail was. It's to be the greatest driving machine on road and track combined. And that was exactly the same brief that the P1 got. And McLaren would say, well, if you actually look at what this car... So they would say, in fact, they have said, and it is extraordinary if you think about it, that this car will ride as well as a 720S, but it's already 2 years before it even gets to a customer lapping a track 3 seconds quicker than a Senna did.
Yeah, that's impressive.
And if you look at that objectively, you can't help but just go, wow. It's as comfortable as a really comfortable, not a 750, a 720. And you and I are both lucky enough to know just how well those things ride. That level of ride comfort with a level of track performance which obliterates a Senna.
That's something.
It's fastest track car to date.
That is something. Yeah. And listen, we mustn't sit here and judge a car that neither of us has driven. But I can understand why, to the typical car enthusiast, it feels more like evolution than revolution.
Yeah,
that's.
I think there is another thing, and I don't think it's necessarily unfair, but all we have to go on at the moment is a spec sheet and some photographs. Yeah, and what McLaren's told us. Yeah, and. I think with both the Ferrari and the McLaren, I don't think anybody thinks that either is better than their predecessors looking. I don't think anybody said that. No. But again, we look at a LaFerrari, we look at a P1, and we've seen all the videos, and I'm sure most people have seen them, at the very least at a Goodwood or wherever. And so they've got to see those cars in their real environment. They've got very used to the way these cars look. And it's not a fair comparison to look at a studio shot of a car parked inside under some totally artificial lighting and go, well, that's not as good as the last one, because you're not comparing like with like. Yeah. I mean, for myself, okay, I haven't seen the F80, but I have seen the W1. To me, it's not as attractive as a P1. But I didn't even think the P1 was that great when I first saw it in the studio, and then I started to see it on videos and on the road, and got to know it myself personally, and I now think it looks amazing.
Yeah.
So perspectives do change, but I do at the same time absolutely understand what people are saying.
And the F80 is coming for quite a lot of criticism for the way it looks, because it's quite a sort of blocky, almost blunt design.
Yeah. And again, it's the comparison, because I thought LaFerrari was a fantastic looking thing.
There's no real fluency in it, is there?
No.
But again, I'll wait to see, actually on the road, not even in the flesh, but on the road.
Yeah.
And I'll judge it then. But it's the other thing about these cars is that they are now phenomenally expensive. I mean, they're hypercars. They've never been cheap, but the price for these things has just gone whoop, particularly the Ferrari. It's a £3 million car now.
Yeah.
And they're building, I think it's 799.
That's an enormous production.
And that's just the coupes.
Have they said they're going to do some open ones?
No, but they did with the LAF.
Yeah.
So maybe there'll be more.
So they'll probably be, well, there will be a 4-figure sum, 1,000 of these things or more knocking about. But they're all gone.
Yeah, they're all gone. This is the amazing thing. The F80 program is going to generate billions in revenue.
Yeah,
which is extraordinary.
Yes.
And it's curious that the car no longer has a V12. Does that worry? We're not getting worried about this stuff, but does it?
I stay awake at night thinking, "Oh my god!" I know exactly what you're saying.
Yeah.
And on this podcast and on our website, we have written about and discussed downsizing and what appears to be a public sort of turning away from. And the example that we've given, only not because it's particularly acute, but because it's just the most obvious one, is the Ferrari 296 GTB. Ferraris, which have always been two-seat mid-engine Ferrari sports cars, which have always been residually so strong. The 296 GTB is a way of losing quite a lot of money quite quickly, despite the fact that I think it's probably the best Ferrari of the modern era.
Wow.
And you think about that, and you think about why that is, and you can only think it's either because, or some combination of people thinking, well, 6 cylinders isn't as good as 8, which is what its predecessor had, or it's concern about the longevity of the hybrid system. There's something going on. So is it significant that this car is a V6? Well, I think all I can say is refer you to my previous answer, which is that they've sold them all.
Well, this is interesting, right? And I haven't been able to verify this, obviously. It's entirely anecdotal.
Are you about to be scurrilous?
Maybe. It might be totally baseless, right?
But don't get us sued.
I don't think this will get us
Just use
sued.
the word allegedly a lot again.
Allegedly. Yeah, okay. Well, we've caveated it enough, I hope. But I saw this on Instagram earlier, and this is by a very prominent collector who is involved in that world.
Yeah.
Every Ferrari collector who's getting one that I have talked to has nothing good to say about it. That's damning.
Wow.
Though they would never.
Do they have a name? If they're on Instagram, they're happy to go public, aren't they?
Yeah. Well, I don't know who it is. It's Lamborghini KS. Very prominent, huge following.
Okay. So not a fantasist.
No. So this is someone who knows.
Yeah.
Though they would never speak out publicly against the beloved stallion. But everyone knows. It's like when you get in an elevator and there's a smell and everyone knows but no one says anything.
Someone's let one go.
That's the Ferrari F80 owners group.
So what is it? Is it, I mean, the sort of the easy flip answer is it's FOMO, isn't it?
Yeah.
That they're having these cars because they don't want to be the one who goes, well, two things, who hasn't got one when all their mates do, but probably more powerfully still is they're terrified of missing the next one because they know if they turn around to Ferrari and go, actually, the best one in the world, I think I'll just sit this one out.
Yeah, they're out.
Next time that comes along, they're not on the list anymore. Is that the way? The problem is that we don't know, because sadly we're not, we don't know how the brains of people who inhabit that world work and what really motivates them. And there's a bit of me which thinks, well, hang on, these people, I know that some of them have inherited vast wealth, but I actually think that an awful lot of them have probably made it by being very, very canny in business and being pretty hard-nosed about pretty much everything. And are we really saying that? Because to me, it's such like a schoolboy reaction. It's so like, oh no, I've got to have it because otherwise, and
it's amazing. Ferrari does appear to turn these people into.
I don't know.
Into school kids.
I would love to. I would love to understand the motivation. Maybe it's an addiction. Maybe you just can't not have it. And the fact that you're on the list, and the fact that Ferrari want you to have one, because this is the thing, you can't go and buy these cars. No. You get offered them. And also the other thing we should also say about the prices, an F80 may cost £3 million. No one is going to spend £3 million on them, because that is just where it starts. And if the atelier process is pretty eye-opening on a SF90 or even a Pura Sangue, what it must be like on an F80, I have just, it's almost unimaginable. But then again, the sums of money to a lot of these people are not significant. No. So why wouldn't you?
Yeah, it's true. I think we should just trot through the history of the hypercar a little bit.
Oh, okay.
You've already mentioned the starting point. What we sort of feel is the starting point for the hypercar.
Yes, because although there are some cars which are earlier, which some people might say qualify, I think if you look at a starting point, which is a mainstream recognised manufacturer. Yeah. I mean, okay, you could say, for instance, that Ford made a few road-going GT40s in the 1960s. I mean, it might have even been a single-digit number of cars. It certainly wasn't more than 20. But if you look at the GTO from 1984, obviously the world's most famous sports car manufacturer, making I think they made 272. So making a meaningful number of these cars, which were designed purely as a limited edition run. It was never meant to be put into series production, and which was meant to be the fastest car of its kind that had ever been seen. That, to me, is what a hypercar is, and the GTO was the car that started that. And as we know, Porsche replied with the 959, Ferrari replied with the F40, and then all the others, the Jaguars and the Bugattis and the McLarens weighed in, and we're up and away.
So I agree. I think the GTO does feel like Genesis, but the one that really expanded the envelope, which is the expression you like to use, isn't it, of road car performance? Yes, is the McLaren F1.
Because I wanted to be an astronaut. If you ever read the right stuff, it's always about expanding
the envelope.
Yeah, it's always the envelope, or a test pilot.
You have at least opened a few envelopes.
well, yes, thank you. I licked a few too, but yes, yes. So you were talking about the McLaren. Yeah, absolutely, because it did, and okay. Others have done it too, but I still don't believe there's a car which. How can I put this another way? I can't say expanded the envelope. I know. Broadened the. You know what I mean?
Everyone knows.
Yes, just put made you understand that a road car could do things that up until that moment it had appeared not to be possible it could do.
Yeah. Fine. Yeah, it did that. It did that through that amazing BMW V12, through the lightweighting, through the carbon tub. Yeah, the first of its kind. Do you know what always seems odd to me?
Sorry, it was the first of its kind. Okay, but if we say that, someone will come on and go Jaguar XJR15.
Okay, fine. Okay.
Which was not a great car, great looking car. Thank you, Peter Stevens. But not a great. I drove one. Not that long ago. Yeah, no desire to drive another. But yeah, it was effectively absolutely the first of the car to do that sort of thing.
Yeah, okay. Yeah. But it's funny looking back, because the F1 and the Bugatti Veyron, they seem worlds apart. But actually there wasn't a huge amount of time between them. What are we talking?
10 years.
10 years, something like that.
Almost exactly 10 years. Yeah.
But just sort of diametrically opposed in terms of their approach.
Completely. And
I suppose the Bugatti is recognised now as being the one that elevated top speed performance to ever new heights, although not in the same way the F1 did.
No, I mean, a Veyron, what's the top speed of a Veyron? I can't remember.
250 something?
Possibly, yeah. And we know that, Andy Wallace did 240 in an F1. Yeah. I think what the Veyron was so extreme with an engine of that size, with all those turbos and all those cylinders. But I think it's the 1,000. I think it's the That's what it's remembered. That's the sort of sound barrier, isn't it? The first 1,000 horsepower car from a recognised manufacturer.
Yeah. So that was breaking some new ground.
Yeah.
And actually, I remember. I mean, there were a lot of people who were quite sniffy about the approach that Bugatti was taking.
But it weighed 2 tons.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, too heavy, too complicated.
Power to weight ratio was worse than the F1s.
Yeah.
Despite having, one had 627 horsepower, one had 1,000 horsepower.
Yeah.
But actually, it was the one with 627 horsepower which had the better power to weight ratio.
Mm. Although, I mean, the Veyron just launched Bugatti into perhaps the most sought after, most exclusive car maker out there.
Yeah.
And it is today with the Chiron, now the Tourbillon. Those are extraordinary cars. But I want to discuss the future of the hypercar, because where does it go from here? Where are we 10 years from now when the W1 and the F80 have been around for a while? How does the likes of Ferrari, the likes of McLaren, elevate the hypercar driving experience, or do something that is meaningful in expanding the envelope of road car performance?
Did you just say expanding the envelope?
It's the best way. It's the best shorthand.
Sorry, I apologise.
And I want to propose one way that it's not going to go. Although you should never say never, because that's a very long time. But we look at EV hypercars.
Yeah,
and they have much more power than the
2,000 horsepower.
Yeah, loads more power.
Wow.
There's no market for them.
No.
There are some people out there who think they're wonderful, I'm sure. But
not many.
Isn't a strong market for those cars.
What did Marty Rimac say about Nevera sales?
They've delivered 50.
Yeah.
And I suspect that also means that they've got orders for roughly 50.
I'm not going to say, but because it's not confirmed. But I've heard stories about Lotus Evija sales.
Yeah.
Or lack thereof, which are, fairly extraordinary.
Yeah. People
you
don't.
Can't get anyone at Pininfarina to even hint at how many of those they've sold.
No. So we've had 3 of them. Extraordinarily fast. Maybe they're wonderful to drive. I don't know. I haven't had a go in them, but
no, nor I.
People don't seem to want them. So it would appear that.
So the point being is, if they'd sold a lot, they would have said so.
Yeah.
Without exception, if you say you're going to make a certain number of cars, look at McLaren with the W1, and you look at Ferrari with the F80. The first thing they come out and they say is they're all gone. In McLaren's case, they say they're all allocated, which means that they have got people. They have spoken to people who they know and trust, and have no reason to think that when they say yes, I'm going to have one of them. I'm not going to have one. Yeah.
We haven't heard that from Rimac, Lotus, or Pininfarina.
No.
So that for now does appear to be a dead end. Who knows? Maybe attitudes will change. Maybe the technology will evolve and the cars will become a lot lighter. Whatever. I don't know. For now, that doesn't appear to be the future of the hypercar.
No. But so it's really, really interesting. So let us say, and let us put our most rosy as tinted spectacles on now, and say that internal combustion engines continue because they are now running on renewables, and that you can put synthetic petrol in these cars, and whoop-de-doo, off we go.
And the ban on them for now, the EU ban on them and the UK ban on them on combustion engines
is lifted, or there are exceptions.
Yeah, for very low volume cars,
exactly.
It doesn't apply.
Yeah, exactly. So there is a world in which it can continue. So if you just sort of multiply up from where the P1 and the LaFerrari were, through where the W1 and the F80 are, to where those car successors are going to be, what's it going to be? It's going to be a 1,600 horsepower car with 1.5 tons of downforce, and an older, even more grizzled version of myself is going to be sitting here in a dozen-year time saying exactly the same thing.
Yeah,
I don't see it.
I don't see it.
But it's so easy, isn't it? We've done it. We sat here and we go, well, it's not going to be that, and it's not going to be that. It's rather more difficult to say what it is going to be. And, and this is where I don't know whether we are the best possible people to be pronouncing on this, because we're not the sort of, although, we are, fairly experienced motoring journalists who've driven a lot of these things and think that they know which way the world revolves. But we're not the sort of people who can buy these sorts of cars. You and I, we look at what Gordon Murray did with the F1 in the 1990s and then with the T50 most recently. And we see a compact car. We see an exceptionally lightweight car. We see a car with a howling V12 engine and a manual gearbox. And we just go, duh, of course. That's what they should be.
Yeah, but that's a car journalist bubble, isn't it?
Well, actually, I should read this now because you have to forgive me. But somebody in all the comments that cascaded in, there was one bloke who wrote, and he called Ivo Nikolov. Ivo, I apologise if I've mispronounced your name. And I just thought this was a really interesting comment on the story. He said, the thing you haven't mentioned, Andrew, is that we are in a, to use your word, bubble. A bubble consisting of petrol heads, with I assume most of TI readers, with not a hope in hell's chance of affording any of these cars, and none of these products are targeted at us. So whether we find them boring or exciting is somewhat irrelevant to the manufacturers. They are targeted at people for whom they are discretionary purchases, much like if I were to choose to buy myself a Lego Technic P1 for £350 1 month after spending £300 on a Lego LaFerrari. It's disposable income. If that's what I choose to do, I could sustain that level of discretionary spend indefinitely. That's the point, isn't it?
Yeah.
That's the other side of the argument. That is, I think, the insight into the world that makes people continue to want to do that. And the fact that you and I sit here and wobble on about T50s, and to be fair, the T50, which is, what was the run on that, 100 cars?
Oh, off the top of my head, I don't know. But
it's really, really low.
Yeah.
And they all went as well.
Yeah.
So no one is saying that approach is in any way wrong. But it's maybe not what the traditional hypercar buyer wants. I don't know.
I mean, sitting here right now, I think that has to be the way that these things go. I don't think it will be, but it feels to me like the sensible approach. Let's not chase performance anymore, because these latest hypercars are still chasing performance. And I suspect we now have enough of that. Sitting here in 2024, I suspect these road cars are probably fast enough, although you probably felt the same back in 1994 when writing about the McLaren F1.
Well, I'm the bloke who said there'll never be a faster car.
So who knows? Perhaps attitudes just evolve and we adapt. And
yeah, I mean, you sort of, until you've realised that actually the people you're talking about are these incredibly, intelligent, successful people. You sort of think that there needs to be an educational process, that people need to be weaned off power and weaned off that other, to me, just dead end, which is downforce, and for it to be cool to be light.
Yeah.
Because, you and I sit here and we know, and everybody listening to this knows that, a lighter car is just a better car for every single reason that, you and I are interested in cars. And we don't need to go into that in any great depth now. But that doesn't seem to resonate out there. It's fantastic that even with something like the W1, which has so much power, that McLaren have done everything they can to keep it light. I mean, it weighs a handful, like 3 or 4 kilos more than a P1.
Yeah.
Despite the fact that it's got, another 300 and something horsepower and, and all that stuff on it. So that is, I think, incredibly impressive. But it still weighs 1,500 and something kilos. Whereas, Gordon Murray's car, I think, is it less than a ton?
Yeah, it is, yeah.
So everybody who has an opinion that is respected out there needs to help sort of turn the ship around. Because then, if these cars do become... But the problem is that for them to become light, they have to be less powerful.
Yeah. Because
you can't package really powerful powertrains in a really light car. And so that's going to be, so people will have to accept that their next hypercars have got less power than their old ones. They might not even get from 0 to 60 quite as fast. And they're going to have to be able to sleep at night with that knowledge.
It might take more than 3 seconds.
Oh, Gordon, that'd be terrible. What would they do in all that time?
Imagine
Get
how
so
late you'll
bored. Oh, dear. Yeah. I think it has to, because I cannot see it carrying on in this direction. But then, as I've said, maybe we're not the right people to be asking about this.
Yeah, it's absolutely fair enough. I really hope that what we've just described does happen, because it feels like a more intelligent way forward, rather than just pursuing more power, more performance all the time.
Whatever the answer is, it has to be cool. It has to be perceived to be cool.
Yeah.
That's what people want. And for some reason at the moment, enormous amounts of power, enormous amounts of downforce are what people think is what makes that kind of car cool. And you and I would be much happier if people thought it was really bloody cool to go around in a car which cast the same shadow as a Ford Focus, but which had a small but unbelievable V12 engine in it, and an incredible manual gearbox, and was just the greatest thing you could ever imagine sitting in from pure terms of what it's like to drive.
Yeah.
But
so a couple of other things that I want to discuss briefly on the topic of hypercars. Where's the Porsche?
don't know.
It's missing, isn't it? That's the missing one. We had the Holy Trinity.
Yeah.
We've got the McLaren and the Ferrari now, but no Porsche. So there was that concept, wasn't there? It's an electric thing that looked like a Le Mans car actually.
Do you think Porsche went down that road and thought we're going to do an EV hypercar?
Maybe.
And then skidded to a halt.
Yeah.
I mean, well, let's not forget that Porsche and Rimac are.
Yeah, they're buddied up now.
I don't know. It's interesting though, isn't it?
I mean, there will be another Porsche hypercar at some point, something else in that bloodline. 959 Carrera GT, 918 Spider. There'll be something else. But maybe Porsche is just sitting back and going, what do people want here?
But,
or where is the progress here?
Yeah. But it must be tempting. As you said, if you look at the revenue Ferrari is going to raise from however many, what we discussed is probably going to end up being a four-figure sum of F80s. Do them 1,000 cars, £3 million each. Even I can make that multiplication. So, and Porsche appears to have decided, well, they don't want to do that. It's really very interesting. I've not spoken to anybody at Porsche about it. I don't know why, but sorry, I don't know what their motivation is. But I can't think of anything better than they are unsure of the future of that particular genre of motor car. But I don't know.
There we go. That's the hypercar. So the other thing that I wanted to mention, this isn't a hypercar, but I've been knocking about for the last day or so in a Maserati Gran Turismo Trofeo.
Right.
And in many ways, it's a really lovely car. I have a few reservations. I will be writing about it, but actually writing about Maserati more generally.
Yeah.
Because there's a lot to be said about that marque at the moment.
It's a marque in a very interesting situation.
Isn't it just?
Yeah.
But there's one very specific thing about this Maserati that infuriated me the whole time that I was driving it back all the way along the M4 yesterday. There may well be a way of turning this off, but as I was driving, I could not find it. I've asked the press office, haven't yet heard back, so maybe I am getting ahead of myself and actually there's a button somewhere that kills it.
I'm trying to imagine it's not the speed limit thing or...
It is the speed limit warning. So there's one in the instrument binnacle and there's one in the head-up display. So in your line of sight, there's two. And if you're above the speed limit, it blinks. Constantly. It's blinking at you. All the time. Two of them. Blink, blink, blink. Which is just so frustrating.
Do you know, that if I knew that was the car that I really wanted, but that it did that, and that there was no way of turning it off, and that every time I got in it, it would be flashing lights at me for the duration of whatever journey I was doing.
I know what you're going to say.
I wouldn't buy the car.
It's reason enough.
I just wouldn't buy the car.
All on its own, it's reason enough.
It would just be like a worm boring into my
brain.
brain.
Oh my God. It was so, particularly in the head-up display, because you see it all the time.
That you probably can turn the HUD off, can't you?
There may well be a way.
I bet you can turn that off. But even if it's actually flashing,
yeah.
If it's just a light, and I think there are lots of cars where there's just a little light somewhere, you can kind of zone that out.
I don't mind it being there. It can be there fixed, solid, but the blinking, oh my goodness me. And why has Maserati done this? Nobody else does. Why have they unilaterally chosen that? Why have they decided that they should do that? You're building a car for a customer. That car should fit the customer's needs. It shouldn't irritate them. You shouldn't actively produce a car that irritates the driver.
But so often in sort of mainstream, particularly things like, sort of EV crossover SUVs, I am beginning to rank them in terms of preference in how much they don't annoy me.
Yeah.
And it's a terrible situation, but we have got to, oh God, I know I sound like such an old curmudgeon, but if we get to a stage now where I get into a new car and it doesn't annoy me at all.
Yeah.
That's why I read about the Ford Explorer on the website recently, and that's the least annoying EV I've driven. It's a Ford, but it's a Volkswagen underneath, but it's a Ford large SUV. But I got on in it, and all the stuff that it has to have on it by law, so you can't criticize that. It's really easy to turn off, and it doesn't flash, and it doesn't bing, and it doesn't bong, and then you can just drive it normally.
And that's what makes a good car these days.
And I'm sitting there thinking, well, actually, we've got to a situation where it's not even a positive, it's a double negative. It's not that it's bad.
Yeah.
And so you kind of get back to zero, and zero is kind of like, which is where you should have been all along. It's kind of like, well, that's really good
the class
now.
leader.
So I came here in a new Alfa Romeo Junior.
Yeah.
And I'm not going to sort of review it on here because I've only driven it a few miles, and I haven't really sort of marshaled my thoughts on the car. But okay, that's quite annoying.
But not as annoying as it could be.
Well, because you have to sit there and you have to work out. If you get in these cars for the first time, and I think I've now worked out how to turn everything off, and you can turn everything off, but it's a fiddle. And the problem is, if you so much as open a door,
you're back.
You're back, and you've got to do it all over again. And that's annoying. It also makes this ridiculous sound, which you can probably turn off too. But it appears to have defaulted. And I've been through all the drive modes, and the sound doesn't change. It just goes as you're driving along. Why would they do that? Why would you just make a car that, the first thing that it does when you get it into the morning, you get up it's a Monday morning, it's chucking it down with rain, you got to go to work, you're probably a bit cheesed off about this, that, and the other. You get into a car and it annoys you. I mean,
same with this Maserati.
And I know it's the law, but it's what
Yeah.
I just appreciated about that Ford was that they'd appreciate it. And, the new Renault 5 when it comes, and Renault done this on another car as well, where you just basically put all the things that annoy you under one roof, or in this particular case, one button. And you come in the morning and you press the button and it all goes away.
Yeah.
Because they know how annoying it is and they thought about you. And if you sit there, if you get in a car and you sit there and you think to yourself, gosh, the people who designed this car thought of me. They're not just thinking about covering their asses legally. They've thought about, well, how's the customer going to perceive that? And is this really going to wind up the customers? Well, it will wind up some, and that others things might wind up others and others. And what we're going to do is we're going to give them the choice, and we're going to allow them to look at all the things that might annoy them, select the ones that do, and put them in the same place. So when they do, they can just turn them off.
Yeah,
it's not difficult.
I think a big part of this is that I believe the Euro NCAP thing awards. They want the 5-star rating, don't they?
Yeah.
And I think there's a point system. So if you do this thing that suits the driver, you have to do something else that pleases the Euro NCAP point system. I think they have to try and balance these things out.
Yeah.
I think it's complicated, but the best can do it. And
does Euro NCAP factor in how many cars crash because drivers become infuriated with their cars, or because they're looking at their screen trying to work out how to turn the bongs off and they drive off through it? None of that, which is absolutely real and is happening all the time, ever gets factored in.
No.
Because actually, in many ways, these processes that they put in place, for many people and for understandable reasons, of course they shouldn't do it. They shouldn't be driving along trying to fiddle with, trying to dig out where the lane keep assistance is. But, it is a totally understandable human reaction. But it never it'll never be factored into those deliberations.
No. Final point then on this Maserati with its speed warning.
Yes, I've been somewhat... This started as a conversation about a Maserati you drove, and I'm so sorry.
No, but it absolutely feeds in. This is the whole point. Someone might say, well, don't speed. Okay, fair enough. But I was driving along a 50-mile-an-hour road yesterday, and the car was convinced I was on a 20 because it had seen a sign somewhere or whatever. And so it's bonging away at me, thinking I'm doing 2.5 times the speed limit. And also, car speedos always overread.
Yes.
I had Google Maps running via CarPlay, and that gives you a GPS speedo. So that gives you
So was it bonging when you weren't even speeding?
I was doing 70 miles an hour, verified by GPS.
Yes. It thought you were doing 73.
74.
Yeah.
And there it is, flashing away at me. Just rubbish. Anyway, maybe it can be turned off and I've missed a very obvious button and I'm making a fool of myself here. That might well be the case.
But you still have to do it every time you got in the car.
Yeah.
And every time you stop to fill it up with fuel. Yeah, every time you stop at the curbside to let your kid out.
It's not obvious.
Yeah.
Oh, well, there we go. I do love a good rant. It's been a while. We've been quite good-humoured on the podcast recently, so it's nice to have a little rant, isn't it?
Cathartic, yes.
Okay, well, we'll wrap this one up, but listen, everyone, thanks for listening, thanks for watching. We do appreciate it. And actually, to demonstrate our appreciation, we are offering podcast viewers and listeners a 15% discount on the cost of subscribing to the Intercooler's online ad-free car magazine. If you go to the-intercooler.com, find the subscribe page, and at checkout, use the coupon code POD15, you'll get a 15% discount.
To the best automotive website in the world.
We think so.
No.
It's the best way to support the show, and of course, you're not just doing that; you're getting full access to our online magazine. So we think it's a good deal. Lots of you have done it, but we want more.
And you help us do this.
Oh, no question.
So if you like the sound of two blokes sitting in a basement in Bristol ranting about things they have no control over, whatever, go and subscribe to our website, and then we'll be able to do more of it.
Yeah, please do. We appreciate it. And we'll be back next week.
Look forward to it. Bye.